Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Responsive Weekly Discussion. I'm Megan Donahue, the content lead here at Virtuous, and today I am joined by Sarah Landman of Insightful Philanthropy. Welcome, Sarah, and welcome to everyone. Oh, Sarah, we can't hear you.
So sorry. Hello. Nice to be here. Thank you, Megan.
So today we're talking about donor signals and how we can use them to create authentic donor journeys. So to get us started, Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about Insightful and the kind of work you're doing there?
Sure. So I'm the Senior Vice President of Insightful Philanthropy. We are a new software and we work with nonprofits to help them deepen donor relationships. We let you know when your donors are in our news and information resources and help nonprofits keep track of that in an automated way, and also keep track of donor interests and use those interests to help deepen relationships and with the relationship-based fundraising process. So we're a tool both for finding information, prospect researchers, organizations that need to get more information in an easy way, and also for fundraisers to help raise more money.
Fantastic. So diving right in, when we're talking about donor insights, what do we mean? Because that sounds kind of a little buzzwordy, and I want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing.
Sure. To me, I consider donor insights, and I think people may have different definition of this, of just anything we know about the donor that may be able to help us with that relationship. That could be past giving, that could be topics that they care about, that could be what they gave to before, wealth screening, their age, other organizations they give to, other people they know, boards they sit on. So that's what I consider as insights.
Great. And I see a lot of people in the chat are talking about the kinds of insights that they use to inform their own fundraising. And I see a lot about past giving, which seems like a good place to start,
Definitely.
along with wealth screening and some donor loyalty metrics, probably. So what kinds of things can we learn from this kind of data about our donors, and why does it matter?
Definitely. We can learn, I think, first and foremost, of what they care about and get some information about how they may expect to be engaged. If we have insights that maybe, let's say somebody's giving, $1,000 a year, but based on what we know from wealth screening and tools like Insightful, we know that they have capacity to do so much more and are doing much more in other places. That's going to change our engagement strategy with that person and move them, just into more of a relationship-based funnel. And we need to at least try to do that with people that we know that information about. Otherwise, it's a missed opportunity. I mean, they may or may not want a relationship-based strategy with us, but if we know that they have capacity and know a little bit more about the story behind that capacity, we can really use that to engage them and help them become a deeper partner in our mission.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So when we're talking about finding this information out about our donors, is that only in a major gifts context, or is that something that we can do across our donor file?
I think it's something you can do across the donor file. Tools like Virtuous are great for that and help that scale. From where I sit, I'm talking more about those donor relationships, person to person, major gifts funnel, mid-level funnel, and information that you can use. Let's say you do a wealth screening, right? And you want to take everybody that you found of a certain rating and above, and then find out more about them. That's what I find as being helpful from a major donor perspective, and using those insights to really inform the relationship and the donor plan. But Megan, I know you and your colleagues at Virtuous have a lot of great ways that scales down to annual donors that then hopefully become mid-level and major donors. I don't know if you maybe want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, that is the thing that we talk about a lot, is bringing the major donor experience to every donor, right? Which is kind of the heart of responsive fundraising, which is what we love to talk about here on the Responsive Weekly. So figuring out those ways that you can use the data plug it into donor personas and segments and start creating communication streams that engage groups of donors who have things in common in a personal way, which is also informed by signals and things like that. So if anybody wants to know how that works at Virtuous, email me. You can have a demo. It's true. But to get to our donor segment or our donor signal questions, I'm interested in the chat. Where are the barriers for you, nonprofit pals, uh, to finding this kind of information about your donors? What feels like a stopping point or a question you have? Drop it in the chat. We'll try to get to it. My next question is, of all these signals, because like there's so much data, right? We could track all kinds of stuff. Which things should we pay the most attention to?
I would say interests, number one. That's the most important thing. I was listening to a marketing chat actually the other day, and the panelist was talking about just now more than ever, there's so much noise in our inboxes, in our texts, everywhere. And if we as nonprofits want to stand out, we need to make our messaging and tailor our messaging so that we're speaking directly to the person, to make it seem like we're speaking directly to the person we're trying to reach. So the easiest way, I think, to do that, and the most important insight, is what they care about, and finding ways to know that about as many donors as possible, and tailor your messaging and tailor your approach.
That makes sense. And that's, again, also to tie it back to the responsive fundraising framework. That's what we talk about when we talk about listening.
Yes.
Starting to really figure out who are these people and what do they care about, and why our organization instead of some other organization, and this cause instead of some other cause. And the more personal you can become, the more directly you can speak to people's real passions, and the more directly you can really deliver a meaningful giving experience, which is an important part of the puzzle, I think.
Definitely. It's all about the experience, especially for, I do a lot of research and speaking on millennial fundraising, especially approaching millennial major donors. And many of the millennial major donors I've interviewed, they expect their giving experience to be wonderful. Experience is more important to them than things. And when they decide to invest in your nonprofit, they really want that to be a true experience that enriches their lives and also is helpful to the nonprofit. The days of just giving a major gift of that age group and walking away is gone. You know, if somebody in that millennial age group, and that, I know we can't generalize, right? That's dangerous, but I've seen common trends that they want to be involved. And even at the least, they want to know impact. They want to know what that gift is doing and how you're making the world and you're better with that gift, and how you're advancing your mission.
Yeah, I see some agreement in the chat about just like our own experiences as donors, which I'm interested to hear more about, because you are all nonprofit professionals, but I assume that many of you are also donors. And I know that my donor experience and how I judge a donor experience has definitely, like, it has some particular expectations because of working in nonprofits. So I think we're often kind of experts on donor experience too. So hearing what people think about their own donor experience is really interesting to me. So does listening include social media? Someone asked, and I say yes. What do you say, Sarah?
Yeah, I absolutely say yes. Another form of listening that people don't usually have as front of mind is tracking your donors in the news. And that's what Insightful does. But there's also other ways to do that. If you have a donor that's in the press, they expect you to know about it, especially millennials, right? In the age of social media, where we're putting our entire lives online. If I'm in a business journal or in a local publication, or I personally as a donor expect the nonprofit to know about that, because there's ways to do that in an automated way. And it's also a good way to find new donors if you follow your institution. And if they mention your institution, or you have certain donors that you follow, it's easier than ever to track news and information sources and social media. There's so many tools that can help you do that. And the more you're listening there, the better, especially if somebody has a negative experience with your nonprofit and they're sharing it on social. being able to get ahead of that and repair that and give a really good apology can save a relationship. So I think anyone that's not listening on social and also to vetted news sources is really missing the boat and missing some golden opportunities.
That makes sense. I'm thinking back to when I worked at a very small nonprofit, trying to do that kind of research manually. Of like, I guess I'll just Google some of my major donor prospects and try to follow them all the time. What a time taker
It's
that
hard.
was. So it seems like automation is the only way to do that at any kind of scale. Do you think that's true?
I believe so. Even if you're a major institution, right, that has a great big budget, you still, like, if there's an automated way to do something, why not automate it? Also, back to your point about Google is an ad platform.
Mhm.
Google's only going to serve, Google serves you up the first things that Google wants you to serve up. And there's so much that's behind paywalls and in vetted resources you're not going to get on Google. So there's important reasons why and easy ways to keep track of your donors in vetted resources. And it's just not something that's front of mind for people, but it's helpful. And I saw in the chat, Insightful automates the listing. Yes, Insightful does automate the listening in news and information resources. And someone wants me to repeat the point about following donors. Is that right,
I think
Megan?
in the press,
You're
yes.
looking there closely than
I'm
me.
talking about.
Yes. So Insightful automates the process of following donors in the press. It basically, and Virtuous is a partner of ours. So it takes all of the information you have in your CRM and creates an automatic smart search on those donors so that you are served up automatically whenever they're in our 13,000 news and information resources from 200 countries. You get that alert for anything that's happening in real time, but also you already have that smart search that if you want to go and learn more about that donor and their past, we have historical information back to the late 70s. So that can really help you get a picture of who that donor is. If they're pinging that they have capacity, what's the story behind that capacity? What's the history of their family, their business? We have obituary content. So what are their family trees look like? What's their story? And then that story can help you better engage with that donor.
Great. And I know a lot of people are asking about pricing. In the recap, I will send you some links to Insightful's information so that you can follow up, as I assume that will be an organization-based and plan-based kind of thing. But to
Yeah.
get to like less of a product thing and more of a how we use this data, let's talk about donor journeys and how we can use data to make them better. So I've got these insights. I'm figuring out this stuff. I got them one way or another about my donors.
Mhm.
What do I do with it? How does that start working?
Sure. Well, it depends on the insight.
Yeah.
But you use what you learn, especially regarding interests, right? If you get in the room with your donor and you've been able to find out things that they're interested in ahead of time, you can plan that conversation to hit on those things and tie them back to your mission and ask the right questions to get there. It's a better use of time.
Mhm.
Because if you know a donor is interested in solving homelessness, right, and that's one thing your organization does, you're going to spend more time talking about that and focusing on that aspect of your mission than talking about your career counseling services. I mean, they're tied together, but that's an example. I know a lot of organizations have have multiple facets to their missions and case for supports that are attached to their missions. So knowing what your donor cares about or having some idea from the resources that you choose to use before that meeting can really help you drive that conversation. It can also help in follow-up. You're in the room with the donor, right? If you're actively listening, like really truly actively listening and asking the right open-ended questions, they're going to talk, they're going to share, they're going to tell you what's most important to them. And taking that information and then using it in follow-up really makes those donors feel like they were heard and helps with a genuine donor experience, that it's more about that it is about them and you care about them. It shows them, it just really builds trust and makes the follow-up more meaningful. And you have more things to follow up with, right? Especially in the time of COVID, it's tough. It's tough to be a fundraiser today, and just anything that we can find out to help keep in front of that donor and steward that relationship is beneficial.
Do you have any favorite questions for those kinds of conversations?
Gosh, yes. I always like to ask about what other nonprofits they care about and why. That's a great way to find out what else they support. I like to ask about their best experience with a nonprofit. I like to ask about their worst experience with a nonprofit. I like to ask them just, a good open-ended question is, tell me how you spend your days, right? Like just any general question like that, or what's the most meaningful thing in your life, or what do you hope, what is your goal? Tell me about your goals that you want to accomplish through your philanthropy, and tell me about your goals in general. There's a million things you can ask, but the key is to keep it open-ended and listen. Don't cut people off. Take good notes. Put those notes in your CRM. Put those notes in your CRM. I'm going to say it again, put those notes in your CRM, because that's going to help you follow up, and it's going to help whoever comes after you. And it's really a service to the donor too, because as a major donor, if you have a gift officer that visits you, if there's turnover and you have a new gift officer every day, every year, or every 18 months, if that gift officer is armed with the information from the CRM, they can come and have that and refer back to it. So it doesn't feel like Groundhog Day for that donor, that you're starting all over again. So it really is, it's a service to your nonprofit. It's a service for yourself, because hopefully you stay at that nonprofit for a very long time, because that's when you can have the most impact. And it's good for the donor as well.
Absolutely. Taylor brought up a great question to ask in those conversations, which is, what is the one problem you would solve if you had an unlimited philanthropic budget? What a big question to ask donors. I love that. I think sometimes we get caught up in those, like the minutia of moves management or the things. And then I love having like a big question like that to encourage like a big vision. I think you could learn a lot about someone from a question like that. Thanks, Taylor, for sharing.
It's fun to dream, right? We all like to dream a little bit. Help your, that's a great question to help your donor kind of think about that. And if they haven't thought about it, to plant those seeds and to dream about the good that they can do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So data-based follow-up. Do you have any tips for doing that in a natural and authentic way? Sometimes I think we get caught in these data, like we've got our CRM, it's full of stuff. It's like, bring up thing. They have 2 kids, their birthday's in April, they went to MSU. How do we take it from data to a natural follow-up?
I think that's different based on your style. Obviously, there's a line between being informed and being creepy. And if you're a gift officer, you likely, you're good with people, that line. Take the things that they have shared and that seem to be the most important in the conversation and refer back to them and mention how you knew that. I would say only stick to, a good rule of thumb is stick to things that are public knowledge, right? That are in the public. Don't get too detailed, but show that you know enough. I'm sorry, that's not a, it's a delicate dance.
It is. And I think it's worth acknowledging that there's an authentic and human way to do things. And there's also I have a file on you and now I'm quoting from it kind of way to do things. And I do think you're right that people in fundraising are usually pretty clear about where that is. So
interests are usually pretty safe. Because that was either shared with the other gift officer, and you can say, hey, I know in your conversation with so-and-so, they mentioned that you really care about this. Or, I know that you were a theater major. Are you still involved there? Is that something that interests you? Because that's something that you'd have if it's out there, right? Especially if you're a college or university. or other gifts they've made that have been public. Those are all things I think you can bring up pretty organically and have success with.
Yeah. So I have two questions that are kind of, I think, could go together. One is
Sure.
asking for best practices for taking notes about interests and then translating that into segmentation.
Mhm.
So if I find out I have a group of donors with certain similarities, what are best practices there? And then the follow up there is, how does that work outside of a major gift program? So if I'm not talking about major donors, but I'm talking about all my donors, how can I use insights for segmentation? That's a very big question. Maybe I shouldn't have combined them.
No, that's okay. So should we start by the taking notes?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I think what's measured is managed, right?
Mhm.
If you really want to be committed to tracking donor interests and using that for cultivation in a major gift program or in a scalable annual digital program, but let's just talk major gifts because that's the notes, right?
Mhm.
Um, Establish a good shorthand for that. I know I liked to, in my conversations with donors, because you don't want to be this all the time, right? And I think that's what the question is going towards. I would just put a big star and then a word, and really kind of establish a good shorthand and for yourself to make sure that comes out, to make sure you remember it, and that's a highlight for your notes and follow up. And I know that, again, I don't want to bring it back to product, but in Insightful, there's a way that you can put that in right after a donor meeting and then be served relevant and meaningful content about that interest for you to learn more about it. And then also for you to follow up with your donor and say, hey, I know we talked about that you like Broadway producing, that's something you do and you're interested in. I just saw this great article, thought of you. So that's a way that we're working with our customers to take that information and put it into action. As far as scaling that down the line, Megan, I think you probably have better insights on that than I do.
Sure. So using donor signals within like your CRM is about noticing where things align or where you have groups, and you can start tagging and managing those groups and then creating automated communications, or other kinds of communication to start an insight-based approach. So a thing that we talk about sometimes is like, let's see if I notice, or I'm sending out emails, I'm running an animal shelter, and I send out emails and I notice that there are some people who open every single one that's about cats, and they
Mhm.
never ever open any of the ones about dogs. I start figuring out I've got cat people, I've got dog people, and I need to start putting them into their own segments. Once I have those segments, I can run communication flows where it's like, you get all cat content all the time, my friend. It is your favorite thing. I'm not going to waste your time sending you emails you don't open. I'm going to send you what you've got. So I think starting with, an easier one is your system alerts you that someone made a gift for the first time and you pop them into a welcome series. These are some good ways to get started with just basic donor insights.
And that goes back to the best practice that we talked about before, right? Is when communication can be that tailored that you open it and say, wow, they know me.
Mhm.
Or that they get me, or you're going to have so much better a response and engagement from that mass appeal when you do segment and you feel like the organization knows you and is speaking just right to you. A weird example of this, and I was reminded of the importance of feeling known the other day.
Mhm.
I've got a 2 and a 4-year-old, and they are obsessed with their favorite colors right now. And anytime they see something that's their favorite color or somebody gives it to them that's their favorite color, they're thrilled. And I think an element of that stays with us, right? Like if I get an email, if I'm a dog lover and I get an email from a shelter about a dog or rescue Boston Terriers, that would be specific for me. I'm like, oh, they know me. So it's a really cool way to scale that relationship-based strategy that I think everybody should be able to have. And I love that you at Virtuous are providing that great donor experience, scaled and helping speak right to donors specifically. It's great.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd like to know from our folks in the chat how they're using insights to influence things like segmentation or donor journeys? For those of you who have started this process, what kinds of things are you grouping people by? How are you appealing to people? It's one question I have. And while we're waiting for that, since silently sitting and watching the chat is probably not the best thing. All right, we've got giving patterns.
Great.
Tim is saying, yeah, that's a great way to do it. Communication preferences is another good way. Um, who wants phone calls, who doesn't? I know we've talked a lot about text messaging and who wants texts and doesn't. Yes, Matthew points out that this is pretty hard to do without a CRM,
Yeah.
and that Matthew's at the point of trying to convince the organization that it's time for a CRM. This is, yeah, it's hard to do this kind of stuff without a system. That's just true. Will is advocating for texts again, our text champion, saying 90% of texts are read versus 30% of emails, which is a compelling statistic.
It is.
Other people are segmenting communication by programs that donors are interested in. Awesome. So we've got our cats and dogs kind of situation.
Great and easy example there, Megan, too. Like that really
Kind of my favorite.
makes it easy to understand.
Good. Well, we are almost at time already. It goes so fast. So if we want to do a lightning round of last questions for Sarah, that'll get us going. Anything we didn't get to? I've been trying to watch the chat, but sometimes I miss it when Noah's not here. Sometimes I miss it when Noah is here. Great. So we have our key takeaways are watching for donor insights, using tools to help us do it. Pricing, I'll send out information on Insightful in the recap so that everyone can get like the most relevant thing to them and Sarah doesn't have to price on the fly. Oh, we just switched from a database to a CRM and has made a huge difference in the amount of time it takes us to segment. If you are trying to justify, say, systems are less expensive than humans, an excellent point, Miranda. Wonderful. Okay, so we're watching for donor insights. We're using tools to do it. We're using those insights to create donor journeys that are meaningful and based in relationship. And we're trying to find ways to do it at scale. Sarah, any last words on donor insights before we wrap up today's discussion?
Just, the more you know, the more you're going to raise. So pay attention to it and build a strategy around that. And I wish everyone here in your organization so much success. The work you do is so important and it's making our world better. And I'm grateful for every single person on this meeting today.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you to everyone who's here today. I wanted to remind you that April 14th and 15th, we have the Responsive Nonprofit Summit coming up. That's 2 entire free days of fundraising and marketing education, all from a responsive and relational standpoint. I will drop in the chat that, oh, someone's asking, Will, can you back up your stat on texts versus emails? And I will send it out in our recap, which comes out tomorrow. So yes, responsive fundraising, responsive Nonprofit Summit, April 14th and 15th. Registration's open and a ton of the schedule is up on the website now. I'll send that out in the recap too, so you can take a look and see what you want to check out. And thanks again, Sarah, for joining us. This was great.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.